Captain Sarah Chun had seen her share of disasters in 15 years of deep space salvage work, but nothing quite like this. The distress beacon had led her small rescue ship Mercy's hand to what remained of a luxury transport vessel drifting dead in space, its hull cracked open like an egg, atmosphere bleeding into the void in crystalline streams. "Jesus," muttered her co-pilot Marcus from the navigation console. "What the hell happened here?" Sarah pressed her face against the viewport, studying the wreckage. The ship had been beautiful once, sleek Altarian design with those characteristic flowing lines that made their vessels look more like art than spacecraft. Now it was a twisted metal corpse, emergency lights blinking weakly from whatever sections still had power. "Looks like an engine failure," she said, pulling up the sensor readings. "Cascade explosion in the drive core. Lucky the whole thing didn't go up." "Lucky for who?" Marcus asked grimly. "I'm not picking up any life signs." Sarah was about to agree when a faint signal appeared on her scanner, so weak she almost missed it. 3 tiny blips, clustered together in what looked like a cargo hold near the ship's stern. "Wait. There." She pointed at the display. "Emergency Section 7. Somebody's alive in there." Marcus leaned over to look. "Those readings are small. Really small. Children," Sarah realized, her heart sinking. She'd rescued families before, but kids always made it harder. They didn't understand why their parents weren't coming home. She was already moving toward the airlock, grabbing her emergency suit from its wall mount. "Bring us in close. I'm going aboard." "Sarah, that ship could blow any second. The hull integrity is shot to hell." "Then, we better be quick." She sealed her helmet and checked her oxygen levels. "Those kids won't last much longer in there." The docking process took precious minutes. Sarah could hear the groaning of stressed metal through the ship's hull as Mercy's hand extended its flexible boarding tube to create a seal with the damaged vessel's emergency airlock. The moment the pressure equalized, she was through. The luxury transport's corridors were a maze of floating debris and sparking conduits. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red shadows. Sarah pushed through the wreckage, following her suit's navigation system toward the life signs. The artificial gravity was failing in patches, making her stomach lurch as she alternated between walking and floating. She found them huddled in a storage compartment that had somehow maintained atmosphere. 3 children, maybe 8 to 12 years old, with the distinctive pale blue skin and large dark eyes of Zephyrians. They looked up at her with a mixture of hope and terror as she forced open the jammed door. "Hey there," Sarah said softly, modulating her voice through the suit's external speakers. "I'm here to help." The oldest, a girl with intricate silver markings along her temples that suggested high social status, stepped protectively in front of the 2 smaller children. "Are you with the authorities?" she asked in heavily accented standard. "I'm a salvage captain. My name's Sarah." She knelt down to their level, noting the expensive fabric of their clothing, now torn and stained. "What are your names?" "I am Lyra," the girl said formally. "These are my brothers, Kai and Nyx." The 2 boys peeked out from behind her, identical twins with matching worried expressions. Sarah's heart clenched at how young they were, how scared they looked despite Lyra's brave front. "Well, Lyra, we need to get you 3 out of here right now. This ship isn't safe." "What about our parents?" Kai asked in a small voice. Sarah glanced around the compartment. No adult life signs anywhere on the ship. She'd have to break it to them gently, later. Right now, we need to focus on getting you safe. Can you all walk? They nodded. Sarah quickly checked each child for injuries, finding nothing more serious than cuts and bruises. Miraculous, considering the state of the ship. She activated her emergency beacon to call for additional rescue supplies from Mercy's hand. "Marcus, I've got 3 survivors. Kids. Sending them across first." "Copy that. Emergency pods ready." The journey back to the airlock felt like it took forever. Sarah kept the children close, her large frame shielding them from the worst of the debris field. Twice they had to detour around sections where the hull had buckled completely. The ship groaned ominously around them, and she could feel it shuddering as internal supports failed. At the boarding tube, Sarah helped each child into an emergency pod, essentially a reinforced bubble with its own life support that could be quickly transferred between ships. Standard procedure for rescuing civilians in damaged vessels. "I want to stay with them," Lyra insisted as Sarah sealed her into the last pod. "You'll see them in just a minute," Sarah promised. "I'll be right behind you." She watched the pod cycle through the airlock, then took one last look around the dying ship. Her salvage instincts were screaming at her. There had to be valuable cargo here, personal effects, something to make the rescue run profitable. But One look at the ship's structural readings told her she had maybe 2 minutes before catastrophic failure. Sarah made it back to Mercy's hand with 30 seconds to spare. The transport vessel came apart in a brilliant flash that briefly turned the viewport white, scattering debris across several thousand kilometers of space. In the Mercy's hand's small medical bay, the 3 Zephyrian children sat on examination beds, looking lost and overwhelmed. Marcus had given them emergency rations and was trying to distract them with pictures on his tablet, but Sarah could see the shock setting in. "So," she said gently, sitting down across from them. "Can you tell me what happened?" Lyra looked at her brothers, some silent communication passing between them. There was an explosion. Father was in the bridge when she trailed off, blinking back tears. "Were you traveling together? Just your family?" Sarah asked. "No." Lyra's voice was barely above a whisper. "There were others. Guards. Father's associates." Something about the way she said associates made Sarah's salvage-trained instincts prick up. The expensive clothing, the formal way the children spoke, the fact that they'd been traveling with guards. This wasn't just any family. "What does your father do?" she asked carefully. The 3 children exchanged looks again. It was Nyx who finally spoke up, his young voice matter of fact. "He runs the Outer Rim." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The Outer Rim territories were largely lawless space, controlled by various criminal syndicates and warlords. If these kids' father ran any significant portion of it. "What's your last name?" she asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know the answer. "Voss," Lyra said with unmistakable pride despite her tears. "Our father is Corin Voss." The bottom dropped out of Sarah's world. Every salvage operator in known space had heard of Corin Voss. The Zephyrian crime lord controlled smuggling routes across 3 star systems, commanded a private fleet larger than some planetary navies, and was rumored to have killed rivals with his own hands. The Galactic Authority had been trying to bring him down for over a decade, and Sarah had just rescued his children. "Marcus," she said quietly, stepping away from the medical bay. "We need to talk." Her co-pilot followed her to the ship's tiny kitchen area, his face grim. "I heard. What the hell do we do now?" "I don't know." Sarah ran her hands through her hair, mind racing. "If we turn them over to the authorities, Voss will hunt us to the ends of space," Marcus finished. "But if we try to return them, we're talking about kids, Marcus. They just lost their parents." Sarah looked back toward the medical bay where the 3 children sat huddled together. "Whatever their father is, they're innocent. Innocent kids who happen to be worth more than our ship as hostages," Marcus pointed out grimly. "Half the syndicates in the Outer Rim would pay millions to get their hands on Voss's children. The other half would pay just as much to see them dead." Sarah knew he was right. They'd stumbled into something far bigger and more dangerous than a simple rescue operation. But, looking at those scared faces, she also knew she couldn't just abandon them. "Set course for New Shanghai Station," she decided. "It's neutral territory. We can figure out our next move there." "Sarah, they're children, Marcus. Whatever else happens, we protect them." As Mercy's hand engaged its hyperdrive and jumped to FTL, Sarah sat with the young Voss children, trying to comfort them while her mind raced with the implications of what they'd just done. She had no idea that across the galaxy, news of the transport ship's destruction was already spreading through the criminal underworld like wildfire. Corin Voss was alive, and he was coming for his children. In the depths of space, other ships were already changing course, converging on the coordinates where the transport had died. Bounty hunters, rival syndicates, and Voss's own people, all racing to be the first to find the survivors. The rescue that should have been routine was about to become the most dangerous situation of Sarah Chen's career. But she'd made her choice. She would protect these children, no matter what it cost her. New Shanghai Station materialized out of the hyperspace tunnel like a glittering jewel against the star field. The massive trading hub was built into a hollowed-out asteroid, its surface bristling with docking arms, communication arrays, and weapon batteries. Neutral territory, as Sarah had said. But neutrality came with a price, and enemies who wanted you badly enough could afford to pay it. Sarah guided Mercy's hand toward one of the civilian docking bays, her hand steady on the controls despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Behind her, the 3 Voss children sat in passenger seats, staring out at the station with wide eyes. They'd been quiet during the 3-day journey, grieving their lost parents while trying to process their new reality. "I've never seen anything so big," Kai whispered, pressing his face against the viewport. "Father brought us here once," Lyra said quietly. "For negotiations." Of course he had. New Shanghai was where the criminal syndicates came to make deals, trade information, and conduct business they couldn't do in civilized space. Sarah realized she'd probably brought the children to the one place in the galaxy where their father's enemies would feel most comfortable operating. "Sarah," Marcus said from the co-pilot's seat, studying his scanner display. "We've got company." She looked at the tactical screen and felt her blood run cold. 3 ships had emerged from hyperspace just as they'd docked, sleek Predator-class vessels with no transponder signals. Pirates or bounty hunters, definitely not friendly. "How long until we're fully docked?" she asked. 2 minutes for airlocks to cycle. Too long. Sarah's finger hovered over the emergency undock sequence. "Kids, strap in tight." "We might have to, Captain Chun." The station's communication officer interrupted her thoughts. "You have an incoming priority message. Text only, high encryption." The message appeared on her screen in stark white letters. "We have your friend. Docking Bay 94. Come alone, or he dies." The syndicate. Sarah's heart stopped. Marcus was looking at her with confusion, but she understood immediately. During the journey to New Shanghai, she'd sent a coded message to Tommy Nakamura, an old friend who worked station security. She'd wanted someone watching their backs when they docked. "They got Tommy," she said quietly. "Who's Tommy?" "Station security. I asked him to meet us." She stared at the message, mind racing. "It's a trap. They want me to leave the kids alone so they can grab them." The 3 Predator ships were moving closer, taking up positions around the docking bay. Even if Sarah tried to run, they'd never escape in her lightly armed salvage vessel. "There has to be another way," Marcus said. Sarah looked back at the children. Lyra was watching her with those intelligent dark eyes, and Sarah realized the girl understood exactly what was happening. "You're going to trade yourself for your friend?" Lyra said. It wasn't a question. "I have to." Sarah knelt down beside the girl's seat. "But I need you to promise me something. If they take me, you look after your brothers. And you don't trust anyone except Marcus." "No." Lyra's voice was surprisingly firm. "We don't run from our problems. Father taught us that." Before Sarah could ask what she meant, the girl was accessing the ship's communication system with surprising skill. "This is Lyra Voss," she announced on an open channel. "I wish to speak with whoever is in charge of this operation." The response came immediately. "Little princess, we've been looking for you." The voice was cold, mechanical, obviously run through scramblers to hide the speaker's identity. But Sarah could hear the cruel amusement underneath. "Who are you?" Lyra demanded with a composure that seemed impossible for someone her age. "Let's just say we represent parties with an interest in your father's business empire. With him gone, there's going to be a power vacuum. Having his children would provide certain legitimacy." Sarah felt sick. They weren't just planning to ransom the kids. They wanted to use them as figureheads for taking over Voss's criminal empire. "My father isn't dead," Lyra said firmly. Laughter echoed through the communication system. "Child, we watched his ship explode. We tracked the debris field. No one could have survived. Then, why are you so afraid of 3 children?" Lyra shot back. The laughter stopped. "Enough games. Captain Chun, you have 5 minutes to bring the children to docking Bay 94. Refuse, and your friend dies. Try to run, and we blow your ship apart." The channel closed. Sarah stared at the children, seeing her own fear reflected in their faces. She'd rescued them from one disaster only to deliver them into something worse. "There's another way," Marcus said suddenly. He was studying the station schematics on his tablet. "The maintenance tunnels. They connect all the docking bays, but they're too small for adults. The kids might be able to." "No." Sarah shook her head. "I won't put them at more risk." "Actually," Lyra said thoughtfully, "it might work. But not the way you're thinking." She turned to her brothers. "Kai, Nix, remember the stories Father used to tell us? About the old days, when he first started fighting?" The twins nodded solemnly. "He always said the key to winning was making your enemies fight each other instead of fighting them directly." Lyra looked up at Sarah. "How many criminal groups would want to capture us?" Probably dozens." "What?" A small, cold smile crossed the young girl's face, an expression that looked disturbingly mature on her childlike features. "Because they can't all have us. And people like this don't share." Sarah was beginning to understand. "You want to start a war. I want to survive. And I want to save your friend." Lyra accessed the communication system again. "But I'll need to broadcast on multiple channels." Within minutes, Lyra had sent the same message to every major criminal contact in her father's network, contacts she'd memorized from watching him work. The message was simple. The children were alive. They were being held on New Shanghai Station, and whoever rescued them would inherit Korin Voss's empire. The response was immediate and chaotic. Sarah watched her scanner display in amazement as ship after ship dropped out of hyperspace around the station. Criminal syndicates, mercenary companies, independent operators, everyone who'd ever wanted a piece of Voss's territory was suddenly converging on their location. Brilliant, Marcus whispered. They'll tear each other apart trying to get to the kids. But Sarah was watching something else on her display. There's another ship coming. Big one. The vessel that emerged from hyperspace dwarfed everything else around the station. It was a Zephyrian dreadnought, bristling with weapons and painted in the crimson and black colors that every spacer in the Outer Rim knew to fear. Corin Voss's flagship, Dark Vengeance. Impossible, Lyra breathed. That's Father's ship. The massive vessel opened communication channels to the entire area. When Corin Voss's voice echoed through the speakers, Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief and terror in equal measure. This is Corin Voss. I am very much alive and very displeased to find my children being threatened. His voice was like ice and molten metal mixed together. Any vessel that does not immediately retreat will be destroyed. Any person who has harmed my children will die slowly. The effect was instantaneous. Half the ships around the station immediately jumped back to hyperspace. The rest began positioning themselves defensively, recognizing that they were now caught between the most dangerous crime lord in known space and whatever remained of their original plan. Voss's next transmission was directed specifically at Mercy's hand. Captain Chun, I believe we need to talk. Sarah found herself face-to-face with Corin Voss in the station's central hub 30 minutes later. She'd expected a monster, someone who could command loyalty through fear alone. Instead, she found herself looking at a tall, elegant Zephyrian male whose pale blue skin was marked with the intricate silver tattoos of high nobility. His dark eyes held intelligence and a controlled fury that made her skin crawl. But when he looked at his children, she saw something else entirely. Love. Desperate, overwhelming parental love. Father. Lyra ran to him, followed closely by the twins. Voss knelt to embrace all three children simultaneously, his composed mask slipping for just a moment to show pure relief. I thought I had lost you, he whispered in his native language, holding them tight. Captain Chen saved us, Lyra said in standard, pulling away to look at her father. The ship was coming apart, but she came aboard and got us out. Voss straightened, his cold gaze fixing on Sarah. She forced herself to stand straight and meet his eyes, even though every instinct screamed at her to run. You risked your life for my children, he said simply. They needed help. That's what we do, even knowing who they were. Sarah nodded. Even then, something shifted in Voss's expression, not warmth, exactly, but a kind of recognition. You could have sold them to my enemies. The bounty on their heads is considerable. I don't traffic in children. No, I can see that. Voss studied her for a long moment. My intelligence network tells me you sent distress calls to several of my competitors, essentially starting a bidding war over my children. Sarah's heart sank. He knew about Lyra's plan. That was clever, Voss interrupted. Dangerous, but clever. It forced them to reveal themselves and divided their attention. He looked at his daughter with unmistakable pride. Lyra has always been tactically gifted. Behind him, Sarah could see the station's security forces carefully staying out of the way. Whatever authority New Shanghai claimed, it meant nothing when Corin Voss was involved. There's still the matter of your friend, Voss said, as if reading her thoughts. Tommy, do you know where they're holding him? Docking Bay 94. The Crimson Syndicate. They've been trying to move into my territory for months. Voss's expression turned predatory. This gives me an excellent excuse to respond. What happened next would be talked about in spacer bars across the galaxy for years. Voss's security forces moved through New Shanghai Station like a surgical strike, dismantling the Crimson Syndicate operation in under an hour. Tommy Nakamura was rescued unharmed. The syndicate members who survived were delivered to station security with evidence of their crimes. Sarah watched it all from the central hub, amazed by the efficiency and restraint. She'd expected a bloodbath, but Voss had been precise, almost clinical. He'd neutralized the threat while avoiding the kind of collateral damage that would turn the station administration against him. You seem surprised, Voss observed, joining her at the observation window. I expected more violence. Unnecessary violence is inefficient. It creates enemies and draws unwanted attention. He paused. However, anyone who threatens my family learns that necessary violence can be quite thorough. Sarah shivered at the quiet menace in his voice. You have questions, Voss continued. Ask them. How did you survive the ship explosion? I wasn't on the ship when it exploded. I had been called away on urgent business. His jaw tightened. If I had been there, if I had been able to protect them, you can't blame yourself for, can I? His dark eyes fixed on her. I put my children in danger by being who I am. That explosion was meant for me, Captain. My enemies used my own family as bait. Sarah understood now. The guilt, the fury, the desperation she'd seen when he embraced his children, it all made sense. Corin Voss might be a criminal, but he was also a father who'd nearly lost everything. What happens now? She asked. Now, I ensure this never happens again. Voss turned from the window. But first, I owe you a debt. Name your price, Captain Chun. Sarah looked across the hub where Marcus was showing the Voss children how to operate a holographic star map, all three kids laughing at something he'd said. They looked normal, happy, not like the heirs to a criminal empire. I don't want money, she said finally. Then what? A promise. That whatever you do to your enemies, you keep those kids out of it. They didn't choose this life. Voss was quiet for a long time. You asked for something I may not be able to give. My enemies will always see them as targets. Then, maybe it's time to consider whether the Empire is worth more than your children's safety. The crime lord's eyes flashed dangerously, and Sarah realized she'd pushed too far. But then, he looked at his children again, and his expression softened. You may be right, Captain. But change takes time. As Sarah and Marcus prepared to leave New Shanghai Station, Lyra Voss approached them one last time. Thank you, she said formally, offering Sarah a small data chip. Father's contact information and mine. If you ever need help, call us. I hope I won't need to. So do I. But Lyra glanced back at her father, who was deep in conversation with his lieutenants. The galaxy is changing. Father's enemies won't stop just because they failed this time. And there are bigger threats coming. What kind of threats? The kind that might make you wish you had a friend who commands a fleet, the young girl said cryptically. Stay safe, Captain Chun. I think our paths will cross again. As Mercy's hand undocked from New Shanghai Station and jumped back into hyperspace, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Lyra was right. She'd saved 3 children from a burning ship, but she'd also become part of something much larger and more dangerous. In the depths of space, forces were already moving that would test every alliance, every friendship, and every choice she'd made. The rescue was over, but the real adventure was just beginning. 6 months after the rescue, Sarah Chun was beginning to think she'd left the Voss family drama behind her. Mercy's hand had returned to routine salvage operations in the outer systems, and life had settled back into its familiar rhythm of distress calls, cargo recovery, and the endless search for profitable scrap. That illusion shattered when she received an encrypted message while investigating a derelict freighter in the Kepler Nebula. Captain Chun, Lyra Voss's voice came through the speakers, older and more serious than Sarah remembered. We need your help. Not as hired crew, as a friend. The message included coordinates for a meeting in the abandoned Xerian system, far from any trade routes or patrol areas. Sarah stared at the data, remembering the young girl's prediction that their paths would cross again. We're not getting involved in another Voss family crisis, Marcus declared when she told him about the message. It might not be about the family. Sarah pulled up the galactic news feeds, scrolling through reports she'd been ignoring. Look at this. 3 criminal syndicates destroyed in the past month. The Galactic Authority is claiming victories, but their tactics don't match GA operating procedures, Marcus finished, reading over her shoulder. Someone else is hunting the crime families. Someone with serious firepower and inside information. Sarah made her decision. 3 days later, Mercy's hand dropped out of hyperspace in the Xerian system to find herself facing a small fleet. Voss's flagship Dark Vengeance dominated the formation, but there were other vessels present, ships she recognized from wanted posters and intelligence reports. Sarah, Lyra's voice came over the communication channel, bright with genuine pleasure. Thank you for coming. The young Zephyrian looked older when Sarah met her in Dark Vengeance's conference room. Still only 13, but carrying herself with an authority that seemed impossible for someone her age. Kai and Nyx flanked her, both looking serious beyond their years. Corin Voss sat at the head of the table, surrounded by figures Sarah recognized as some of the most wanted criminals in known space. Crime bosses, smuggling kings, mercenary commanders, the kind of people who usually shot each other on sight. Captain Chun, Voss acknowledged her with a nod. Welcome to what may be the last gathering of its kind. Meaning, we're all being hunted, said a gravelly voice from across the table. Sarah recognized Thane Murdoch, the infamous human pirate whose fleet had terrorized shipping lanes for over a decade. Someone's declared war on every criminal organization in the galaxy. The Galactic Authority? No. This came from a Sathari female whose chitinous features marked her as Clan Shadowstrike, the most feared assassin guild in 3 systems. These attacks are too coordinated, too well-informed. This is someone with intimate knowledge of our operations. Voss activated a holographic display showing a galactic map dotted with red markers. In the past 6 months, 43 criminal organizations have been destroyed or crippled. Not arrested, destroyed. Ships vaporized, bases obliterated, entire command structures eliminated. Someone's consolidating power, Sarah realized. Or preparing for something bigger. Lyra stood, moving to manipulate the display. Father, show her the pattern. The map shifted, highlighting the timing and location of each attack. Sarah studied it, her salvage-trained mind looking for the underlying logic. They're not random, she said slowly. It's systematic. They're eliminating anyone who might interfere with what. We think it's connected to this, Kai said quietly, producing a data tablet. We've been monitoring Galactic Authority communications. Look, the intercepted messages spoke of massive fleet movements, classified research projects, and something called Operation Cleansing Light. Most interesting were references to non-human assets and pacification protocols. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They're planning something against the alien populations. Not just aliens, Voss said grimly. Anyone who doesn't fit their vision of human supremacy. The Terran Purity movement has been growing in influence within the GA for years. Our sources suggest they've finally gained enough power to act. The Terran Purity movement. Sarah had heard whispers of them. Human supremacists who believed the galaxy would be better off without alien contamination. But she'd never imagined they could infiltrate the Galactic Authority itself. So you're forming an alliance, she said, looking around the table at the assembled criminals. We're forming a resistance, Lyra corrected. The GA will come for the criminal organizations first because we operate outside their jurisdiction. But they won't stop there. Why should I care? I'm human. The words came out harsher than Sarah intended, but she needed to understand what they were really asking of her. Because you're not the right kind of human, Murdoch said bluntly. Independent operators, salvagers, traders who work with alien crews. We're all contaminated in their eyes. Voss pulled up another display showing personnel files. The Purity movement defines human purity very narrowly. Citizens of approved worlds, proper genetic lineage, loyalty to their ideology. Everyone else is expendable. Sarah studied the files, seeing her own life reflected in them. Born on a frontier colony, mixed heritage, spent years working alongside alien crews. In the Purity movement's vision, she was definitely expendable. What exactly are you proposing? She asked. An intelligence network, Lyra said. Your salvage operations take you into areas where we can't operate openly. You have contacts throughout the independent trader community. We need early warning of GA movements, safe houses, supply lines. You want me to spy for a criminal alliance. We want you to help save the galaxy from genocide, Voss said quietly. The meeting continued for hours, laying out plans that seemed impossibly ambitious. The criminal alliance would share intelligence, coordinate resistance efforts, and prepare for the war they all knew was coming. It was a desperate gamble, but Sarah found herself impressed by the scope of their preparation. We've been moving assets for months, explained Captain Zara, a Deltan smuggler whose routes covered half the galaxy. Safe houses, weapon caches, communication networks. When they come for us, we'll be ready. The problem is legitimacy, admitted Murdoch. We're criminals. Even if we're fighting for the right reasons, who's going to trust us? That's where people like Captain Chen come in, Lyra said. Independent operators with clean records. You can reach people we can't. Sarah looked around the table again, seeing the determination in their faces. These weren't the monsters she'd expected. They were people, flawed, criminal people, but still people, fighting for their right to exist. I need guarantees, she said finally. No more targeting innocent civilians. No slavery, no drugs, no weapons sales to terrorists. Agreed, Voss said immediately. And I want oversight. Regular reports on alliance activities. Done. Sarah took a deep breath. Then, count me in. The next few hours were a whirlwind of planning. Sarah found herself assigned to coordinate resistance efforts among the independent trader community, using her reputation as a reliable salvage operator to build trust and gather intelligence. There's something else, Lyra said as the meeting broke up. Something we haven't told the others yet. She led Sarah to a smaller conference room where only the Voss family was present. Kai activated a privacy shield that would prevent any surveillance. 3 weeks ago, we intercepted a communication from a GA research facility, Nick said, his young voice serious. They're not just planning military action. The data he showed her was horrifying. Biological weapons designed to target specific alien genetic markers. Sterilization compounds that would prevent non-human reproduction. And, worse, plans for re-education camps, where humans who associated with aliens would be corrected. They're planning to wipe out entire species, Sarah whispered. Or enslave them, Lyra said grimly. The survivors would be useful as labor, once they're properly conditioned. Sarah felt sick. This wasn't just about criminal organizations anymore. This was about the future of galactic civilization itself. Why show me this separately? Because some of our allies wouldn't handle this information well, Voss admitted. Murdoch would want to strike immediately. Others might panic and try to run. We need to be strategic. What are you planning? We're going to steal their research, Lyra said simply. All of it. And then, we're going to make sure the galaxy knows what the Purity movement really wants. The plan they outlined was audacious beyond belief. Coordinated strikes on multiple GA research facilities, timed to coincide with intelligence releases that would expose the Purity movement's agenda to the galactic public. It would require precise timing, massive resources, and incredible luck. The research facility in the Antares system is the key, Kai explained, manipulating a holographic schematic. It's where they're coordinating all the biological weapons research. If we can get inside. It's heavily defended, Sarah pointed out. Military-grade shields, automated defenses, a full garrison. Which is why we need an inside track, Lyra smiled. As it happens, they're expecting a salvage contractor to remove some decommissioned equipment from the facility next week. Sarah stared at her. You want me to infiltrate a top-secret GA research base? We want you to be exactly what you've always been, Voss said. A salvage operator doing her job. But, while you're there, I gather intelligence and plant surveillance devices, Sarah finished. If you're willing. Sarah thought about the biological weapons data, the plans for re-education camps, the systematic extermination of entire species. She thought about the thousands of independent operators like herself who would be swept up in the Purity movement's vision of human supremacy. When do we start? The infiltration of the Antares facility went better than anyone had hoped. Sarah's salvage credentials got her inside without question, and the surveillance devices Kai had given her were virtually undetectable. Within hours, the Alliance had complete intelligence on the facility's layout, security protocols, and research projects. But it was what they found in the research computers that changed everything. The time frame is accelerated, Lyra reported during their emergency conference call. Operation Cleansing Light begins in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Sarah felt her heart stop. That's impossible. We're not ready. Neither are they, apparently. But they're moving anyway. Voss's image on the screen looked grim. Our sources in the GA suggest that someone leaked information about our alliance. They know we're organizing. So they're striking first. Exactly. Which means we have 2 choices. Run and hide, or fight with what we have. The vote was unanimous. They would fight. What followed was the most intense 2 weeks of Sarah's life. The Criminal Alliance moved with surprising coordination, activating sleeper agents throughout the Galactic Authority, positioning their fleets for maximum impact, and preparing for a war none of them were sure they could win. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, coordinating communications between dozens of independent operators who had agreed to join the resistance. Former enemies worked together with a unity born of desperation, putting aside old grudges to face a threat that would destroy them all. When Operation Cleansing Light finally began, it wasn't the swift victory the Purity movement had expected. The Alliance struck first, releasing the biological weapons data to every major news network in the galaxy simultaneously. The revelation that the Galactic Authority was planning genocide sent shockwaves through civilized space, turning public opinion against the Purity movement overnight. But the real shock came when the shooting started. The GA fleets, expecting to face disorganized criminal gangs, instead found themselves confronting a coordinated resistance with inside knowledge of their plans. Battles raged across a dozen systems as the Alliance's hidden fleets emerged from their hiding places to strike at GA supply lines and research facilities. The war lasted 3 months. When it was over, the Purity movement had been exposed and destroyed, their leaders facing trial for attempted genocide. The Galactic Authority itself was reformed, with new safeguards against extremist infiltration. Sarah stood on the observation deck of Mercy's Hand, looking out at the Celebration fleet gathered in the liberated Centris system. Ships that had been enemies weeks before now flew together in triumph, their crews working to build a new kind of galactic community. "You did it," she said to Lyra, who had joined her at the viewing port. "We all did." The young Zephyrian, now 14, and bearing the weight of command far beyond her years, smiled tiredly. "Though I'm not sure what comes next." "What do you mean?" "The alliance was born out of necessity. Now that the threat is gone." Lyra shrugged. "Some of our members are already talking about going back to their old ways." "And your father?" "He's changing. We all are." Lyra looked out at the fleet. "When you spend months fighting for something bigger than yourself, it's hard to go back to just thinking about profit. So what will you do? Build something new. A confederation of independent worlds and organizations, working together for mutual protection and prosperity." Lyra's eyes gleamed with the same tactical intelligence Sarah remembered from their first meeting. "Someone needs to keep the GA honest, make sure nothing like the purity movement can rise again. And you want me to be part of it." "I want you to be our conscience," Lyra said seriously. "The voice that reminds us why we fought, and what we're fighting for." Sarah looked out at the Celebration fleet, thinking of the journey that had brought her here. 6 months ago, she'd been a simple salvage operator. Now she was part of something that could reshape the galaxy. "All right," she said finally. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "No more crime families. If we're building something new, we do it legitimately." "Agreed." "What else?" "Education. For all the children caught up in this war, human and alien alike. They deserve a chance to build something better than what we had." Lyra smiled, and for the first time since Sarah had known her, she looked like the teenager she actually was. "I think my brothers would like that. They're already talking about starting a school for young refugees." "And one more thing," Sarah added. "No more secrets between allies. If we're going to trust each other, it has to be complete trust. Even when the truth is ugly. Especially then." Lyra extended her hand in the human gesture of agreement. "Welcome to the Confederation, Captain Chun. I think you're going to like what we build together." As Sarah shook the young leader's hand, she thought about the scared children she'd rescued from a burning ship 6 months before. They'd grown into something remarkable, shaped by tragedy but not broken by it. In trying to save them, she'd ended up being saved herself. The galaxy was changing, and for the first time in years, Sarah Chun was optimistic about the future. It wouldn't be easy, building something new never was. But, with allies like these, she believed anything was possible. In the months that followed, the Confederation of Independent Worlds would grow into a force for stability and justice throughout the galaxy. Sarah would serve as one of its founding members, helping to establish the principles and institutions that would guide its development. And sometimes, late at night on her ship, she would remember 3 frightened children huddled in a storage compartment, and marvel at how a simple act of compassion had changed everything. The rescue was complete. The future had begun.